By the time I got back to Texas, I'd already beaten cancer once, and somehow that still wasn't the hardest fight waiting on me. The hardest part was pulling up to my own family ranch and finding armed guards at the gate cameras in the trees and a polished sign telling me I was trespassing on land my blood had held since 1893. There are a lot of things a man can swallow in this life. Pain, pride, bad luck, fear. But being treated like a stranger on your own front porch is not one of them. I crossed the state line just after sunrise in my old Ford stiff in my hip, running on bad coffee and pure stubbornness. I'd driven through the night from Arizona, where cancer treatment had taken 4 years, most of my savings, and every soft edge I had left. But I made myself a promise in that hospital bed. If I walked out alive, I was coming home to Millstone Ridge. That ranch sat in Comanche County, 320 acres of dry pasture, cedar, and family history. My people had been on that land since 1893, so when I turned onto the ranch road, I expected the old crooked gate and the hand-painted sign swinging loose on a nail. Instead, I saw a polished steel gate with an electronic keypad, security cameras strapped to trees, and a sign that looked like it had never touched dust in its life. Welcome to Cedar Flats HOA. Private community. No trespassing. For 1 second, I thought I'd taken the wrong road. Then I saw the old Millstone family stone marker, half buried in weeds by the entrance. Same road, same land, wrong world. A guard stepped out of a booth with a clipboard and a smile so rehearsed it made my teeth hurt. "Sir, this is private property. If you don't have a resident code or visitor pass, I need you to turn around." "I am the resident," I said. "Roy Millstone. I was born in that house up there." He told me the property had been sold years ago to Sunridge Holdings. I told him I never sold a damn thing. He touched his radio and asked me to leave. I parked off the road instead and called Loron McConnell, the man who'd been managing the ranch while I was away. He answered on the third ring, and when I told him where I was, he went quiet. "Roy," he said finally, "I thought you sold it." Loron told me he'd gotten formal legal notice signed with my name ending his management contract because the ranch was being transferred to new ownership. Somebody had forged my name, pushed my people out, and turned my home into a gated development while I was busy trying not to die. I drove straight to the Comanche County Courthouse. A county records officer pulled up the file, and there it was. A deed transfer from me to Sunridge Holdings dated 2015. It wasn't my signature. They got the middle initial wrong, used an address I hadn't had in years, and listed a sale price of $185,000 for land worth millions. Then came the part that told me this wasn't sloppy, it was criminal. The notary on the transfer had lost his license 2 years before the document was supposedly signed. That was the moment I stopped hoping this was some county mistake. It was theft just done with paper instead of guns. The buyer was tied to Cedar Flats, and the managing member was Catherine Esben, president of the HOA. I took every copy I could carry and drove straight to Caleb Norris, an old Army buddy who'd become one hell of a property lawyer. He read the papers in silence, then looked up and said, "Roy, this isn't a dispute. This is organized fraud." He filed notice of litigation that same day, freezing any further sale or construction. 2 days later, we drove back to the gate together. Only this time I wasn't guessing. The guard called in backup. 2 men in black uniforms rolled up with guns on their hips and fake official patches on their sleeves. One of them told me I had 60 seconds to vacate the area or I'd be detained. Detained on my own land. I hit record on my phone and told him to say that again, nice and clear. He didn't. Caleb leaned out the window and told him if he laid one hand on me, he'd be explaining himself to a judge before sunset. Then I called Sheriff Jean Wilcox. She arrived in a black and white cruiser, stepped out wearing a real badge, and in less than 30 seconds, those fake deputies lost all their swagger. She looked at their uniforms, looked at our paperwork, and barked at them to get back behind the gate before she locked them up for impersonation and unlawful detention. But the real twist came the next day. Loron gave me a box of old ranch papers, and buried in it was a letter mentioning something called the Millstone Trust. I had never created any trust. Caleb dug into the county archive and found one on file supposedly formed in 2011 by R. Dale Millstone. Dale was my second cousin. Dale had died in 2009. They had used a dead man's identity to help move my land. And then it got worse. Katie Esben wasn't just some outsider with a fake smile and a brochure budget. She was distant family, just close enough to know the name, the history, and how to make a forged chain of consent look believable. That answer came from Amy Blake, a Dallas investigative reporter who showed up at my motel room with a binder full of leaked HOA emails, grant papers, and internal memos from a whistleblower inside Cedar Flats. One line in particular burned itself into my head. Millstone Ridge is central to the brand. It does not matter if the old man ever comes back. Amy also found that preservation grants had been funneled through a nonprofit tied to Katie. Money meant for rural conservation had paid for roads, gates, cameras, private security, and glossy marketing built around my family name. My house was being discussed as a future heritage guest experience. Then came another problem: wearing expensive boots. A cousin named Thomas Millstone showed up claiming inheritance rights, smiling like a man who thought paperwork was the same thing as blood. He suggested a deal: let the development stand, let the house stay as a landmark, and he'd take his share. Caleb shut him down fast. Legally, Thomas had nothing. But the point wasn't winning. The point was delay, confusion, pressure. Muddy the ownership, stretch the fight, wait for the old cancer survivor to run out of money or energy. A few nights later, I found an old ledger photocopy taped to my motel door. No note, no name. It showed Thomas's father had signed away any future claim to Millstone Ridge in 1972 for $500 and 2 mules. I expected a trick. What I got was a cracked version of the same man. Katie had cut him out. Once he realized he wasn't getting land money or even a plaque, he flipped. He handed us internal emails, meeting records, and a spreadsheet labeled absorption targets. Millstone Ridge wasn't the only property. There were 11 more: aging owners, veteran families, rural parcels near expansion zones, notes about proxy sales, inheritance, confusion, pressure tactics, intimidation, risk. It wasn't one fraud, it was a system. That was when this stopped being just my fight. Amy took the story public. Whistleblowers came forward. The Texas Attorney General opened an investigation. Financial records got frozen. Then Caleb found the final crack in the whole rotten structure. Cedar Flats HOA had never even been legally formed under Texas property law. The thing threatening me didn't just act illegally. It never legally existed at all. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, ranchers, veterans, people standing shoulder to shoulder in the back. I wore my old Army dress jacket for the first time in years. It was tight across the shoulders, but it still felt right. Judge Helen Stroud read the findings in a voice so calm it somehow made it harsher. Forged deed, invalid notary, unauthorized use of a deceased man's identity, fraudulent entity formation, abuse of public funds. Then she said the words I'd carried in my chest for years. Ownership of Millstone Ridge is restored to Roy D. Millstone, effective immediately. I just sat there with my hands locked tight, trying not to come apart in public. The court ordered Cedar Flats dissolved. Sunridge Holdings was seized pending federal review. All unauthorized signage and easements had to be removed. Katie Esbin had already been arrested for wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and misuse of public funds. The fake notary went down too. The half-built homes on my grazing fields were condemned, some torn down, the rest left standing like skeletons of bad ambition. 2 months later, I took down the final HOA sign myself. No speech, no crowd, just me, a wrench, and a long overdue feeling. The gate was unlocked. The cameras were gone. The porch swing still creaked in the evening heat. I put up a new sign by the road, hand-carved and plain. Welcome to Millstone Ridge, still here. That was the lesson in all of it, I guess. Greed rarely kicks your door in wearing a villain's face. Most times it comes smiling, talking about progress, paperwork, community efficiency. It counts on decent people being tired, isolated, sick, or too polite to raise hell. They didn't steal my land because they were smarter than me. They stole it because they thought I was gone, and because too many people trust stamped paper more than living truth. Not this time. Now, the North Barn helps other landowners understand deeds, probate, HOA, abuse, and the little traps nobody warns you about until it's too late. And me, I stand at that old stone marker some evenings watching the sun drop over land that nearly got turned into a themed attraction for rich strangers, and I let myself enjoy one hard, satisfying truth. They built their whole scam on one assumption. They thought I wouldn't come back. They were wrong. So let me ask you this. When people use paperwork, money, and fake authority to steal what isn't theirs, do you call that business or do you call it war by another name? And if this happened in your town, would people stand up or wait until it was their own gate getting locked? Tell me where you draw the line between justice and revenge. And if you've ever seen power abused like this in real life, share your story too. Because the one thing people like that love even more than land is silence.